welcome to a new segment of Expert Insights hosted by the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. Today we have the pleasure of discussing the political economy approach to dealing with non-tariff measures in South Asia with Dr. Selim Raihan. Dr. Selim Raihan is a professor at the Department of Economics at the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh and also heads the South Asian Network for Economic Modeling. Dr. Raihan, thank you very much for joining us at the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. You discussed the political economy approach to dealing with NTMs in South Asia. So why don't we start off by discussing what sort of political economy factors influence regional integration measures in South Asia?
Thank you. I actually proposed a framework, a political economy approach for deeper regional integration. Here I find there are three major drivers for deeper regional integration. The first set of drivers is actually the economic drivers, where I talked about the market integration, growth integration, investment and policy integration. But more importantly, if you really want to make these economic drivers functional, then you have to consider the political economy drivers, where I can see the role of primary institutions, different kinds of institutions like the government, the policymakers, and then different business and private sector initiatives, and then other institutions like the government's standard organizations who set up the standards. Then there are set of structural factors like, in South Asia we have landlocked countries, Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan. We have some historical process like India-Pakistan political rivalry, the political bilateral relation with India and other countries. So these are the structural factors. Then there is an important question of looking at the regional status of regional public goods, especially regional infrastructure, trade facilitation issues. And on top of that, which I wanted to highlight the role of political elites, how interested the political elites at the regional, at the country level, to take the regional integration agenda forward. And we know that these two drivers, economic and political economic drivers, they're also influenced by some extra-regional drivers, like how these countries are integrated with countries outside of this region, especially with China, European Union, US, and other countries. So I thought that the things which are at the heart is of course economic incentives, but in order to make these economic incentives or drivers functional, you need the political economic drivers more important.
And within these political economy drivers, what's obstructing those drivers succeeding within the region?
We know that, as I mentioned, that there are certain structural factors or barriers. You can't change your neighbor, for example, the neighbor is kind of historically, geographically determined. But what I said that probably you can improve the relationship with your neighbor. So even if you can't remove many of the structural factors, you can't change the landlockedness of Nepal or Bhutan or Afghanistan. But of course you can improve the connectivity of these countries so that these countries can have access to the seaports in a better way or cost effective way. So there are areas for improvement, but all this require, of course, as I said, the political will of the political leaders. There are two areas. One is that we talk about the trust deficit, and this is huge when there is a bilateral trade with India, especially with India and other countries, bilateral relation, and that also vary, and that is not very static. Like what the trust deficit we had 5 or 10 years back. Probably you can see that things have changed at the bilateral with some countries. For example, India and Bangladesh, they have moved now with many areas of cooperation, and probably the trust deficit is being reduced. Similar thing can also happen when India-Sri Lanka bilateral trade and bilateral economic cooperation being expanded. So the political leaders in this region, especially I would say that India, since India is at the center, they have to act very consistently and with some bold decisions, and they have to take the other neighboring countries in confidence to take the regional integration agenda forward. But at the same time, we have to understand that this is not something a one-way approach, that India, we would expect everything from India, but other countries, they will also have to reciprocate. They'll also have to show this political will, that they want for deeper regional integration.
And within your drivers, you spoke about the public sector as well as the private sector. What sort of measures can be taken to coordinate both the public and private sector to address this trust deficit?
The issue is that if you look at regional trade, actually the trade, mostly the private sector do it. It's the private sector driven trade. But when it comes to trade negotiation, when it comes to negotiation between countries, actually the government does it. So probably you may find that the private sector, in many cases, they feel left out. So it is the role of the government and the related ministries and institutions to take the private sector in confidence, so that there will be different lobbies from the private sector. Through integration, some sectors will be benefited, some sectors will be they will be affected. But at the end, the government and their institutions, their ministries, they have to act in a way so that the private sector, they feel the confidence that there is a larger gain if the countries go for liberation and integration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raihan, for your time and your visit to the Institute of Policy Studies.
You are most welcome.
That was Dr. Selim Raihan discussing the political economy approach to dealing with non-tariff measures in South Asia. For further insights such as this, please join us on our YouTube channel or our website at ips.lk. Thank you.